So Christ's claim is that he embodies the Spirit in the Old Testament. You think that's right? I think that's the simplest explanation. And it has to do, you said already that people can allow ideas to possess them. So what idea should you allow to possess you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the insistence in the Judeo-Christian tradition is that you should invite in the spirit of your ancestors, the unified, monotheistic, creative, loving, kind, truthful spirit of your ancestors. Something's coming in, or a multitude of things. How about a diversity of things? How about a rainbow of things, or a plurality of things? What, under some united flag? The union of diversity? I don't think so. It's no wonder that we believe in the union of diversity when we believe that a man can be a woman. If we believe those things, there's nothing we won't swallow. No camel too big to go down our throats. No totalitarian lie we won't rush to embody. So you asked earlier, where are we headed? Like, every single person is making up their mind about that. Well, they always have, but it's really evident at the moment. And it's going to become a lot more evident than it is.
Because people are moving in the wrong direction?
No, they've always done that, but not this fast.
Interesting.
Right? Because we're in a runaway cycle of transformation. And
yeah, I think we're in a positive feedback loop where social media allows simplistic ideas.
We're in a lot of positive feedback loops.
Yeah, the only solution I see is
that's
the fight
the dragon
with better
that eats
ideas.
its own tail. The positive feedback loop.
We interpret the Ouroboros differently.
Well, it's many things, because it is a symbol of chaos. But one of the things it is a runaway positive feedback loop.
Interesting. I see that as what ends up happening when you don't have the right foundational model.
Yeah, definitely.
That you can't make progress because your core foundation is such that you eat your own progress.
Yeah,
through incompetence is the easiest way to think of it. You have the wrong model. That's, to me, what the Ouroboros is about, which is the whole idea that you're saying about...
That's why it emerges when the father dies.
You know, because it's
if the father is a corpse, the Ouroboros makes itself manifest. The Mesopotamians knew this. So the Mesopotamian gods killed their father, Apsu, and tried to live on his corpse. Well, that's what we're doing when we mouth slogans. We're trying to live on the corpse of the past. And instead of embodying its living spirit, they slay the past. They have no regard for the past, which is also what we're doing, by the way. They slay the past and attempt to inhabit its corpse, like Geppetto in The Whale. It's the same idea. And Tiamat shows back up. She's the dragon of chaos. And her goal is to destroy everything. And that's one of the precursors. That idea is one of the precursors to the flood myth. And the word Tiamat is, they say, etymologically cognate with the word tohu vabohu. And that's the chaos out of which God makes order at the beginning of time. All these ideas are linked.
So if you inhabit dead ideas, you will bring back chaos.
Of course, the dead ideas can no longer sustain you in your active contending with the present. This happens in The Lion King. What happens when Scar takes over the Pride? What happens when Scar takes over Pride Rock? Pride Rock. It's so comical. Scar takes over Pride Rock. Well, why? Well, he's scarred. That's the first thing. He's intellectually arrogant, obviously. And the whole kingdom turns into a wasteland. A dry, sterile desert wasteland. That's always the case. It's always been the case. And we're seeing the archetypal outlines more clearly now because things are changing at a ever accelerating rate. And so God only knows. What does Jonathan Pageau say? Giants will walk the earth once again. They already are.
What is the Enlightenment? Why do we have to get to the other side of it? Or why do you think maybe we already are?
The Enlightenment is the belief that the material world speaks for itself. And it's not true. You have to see facts through a lens of value. The postmodernists got that right. That's why we are in the culture war to some degree, is the postmodern critique was correct. We see the world through a story. And the facts now indicate that. I've talked with Carl Friston, for example, one of the world's great neuroscientists. Many people know this now. I asked Friston, is is an object a micronarrative? He said, yes. So
Because
even
we have
your
to understand what to do with it.
function, you bet, you bet, you bet, you bet. You don't just see the world. You see the value of the world. And you don't see the world and infer the value. You see the value. You see the value. And the implicit structure of your unconscious is the matrix of value through which the world reveals itself. And properly formulated, that matrix has a multidimensional narrative structure that's coherent, that's reflected in the structure of the biblical stories. And we know that. Well, we say, well, what's the foundational document of Western civilization? Well, obviously, it's the Bible. Like, forget the theology. Historically. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means it's the seed from which your perceptual matrix grew. You're a more or less coherent echo of the biblical corpus. That's what you are. And the more you know of the stories, the hyperlinked stories, the more fully fleshed that incarnation, internal incarnation becomes. The Bible was written in consort, you might say, obviously with the function of the human nervous system, both individually and collectively. It was woven together over thousands of years and also evolved to match the structure of our memories, all of that, and the structure of our attention. So the postmodernists, when they realized that we saw the world through a story, which was a brilliant discovery and was made in many disciplines at the same time, by the way, they jumped to the next question, which was, well, if we see the world through a story, what is the story? And they said, well, it's power and its twin sister, its evil twin sister, hedonism, but power. They were Marxists. It's all about power. So have it your way. Play with fire. See what happens. Power. I think power is interesting too, because you might say, well, why would you want power? Like if I could just ask you to walk along with me, why wouldn't I do that? Why would I have to exercise power over you? Well, how about I want you to do something that you don't want to do? Well, what? How about something for my immediate gratification? That's why Jonathan Pajot has said that the Marquis de Sade is the evil brother of the Enlightenment rational mind. It's like, absolutely. Same thing, same idea explored by Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment with Raskolnikov. Yeah, brutal.
All right, so let me say, if I'm understanding you correctly, that to get on the counter-enlightenment train, we could sum it up in a tongue-in-cheek way and say facts are dead.
Facts are always dead. Facts are always dead. That's why you can't follow them. There's more facts than there are things. You can't orient yourself. Imagine I drop you in the middle of a desert. It's like all the facts are at hand, man. You're still going to die. Why? Because the territory isn't the map. Because the land doesn't speak. How about that? How about all of that? Right? No.
Can I give you my favorite example of this?
Sure.
Okay, this is true. What we think of as the entire world, everything that we can see, is 0.00035% of the available electromagnetic spectrum.
Right. Good example.
So looking at you, I should see a number of photons in a given wavelength that are reflecting off of that fabric, but I don't. I see black, I see red, I see gold, whatever.
You see tools and obstacles.
Yes, for sure. And once I understood, oh my God, I'm seeing a ridiculously gross simplification of what is really in the world, then I realized my brain is made up of algorithms. And once I realized my brain is made of algorithms, and algorithms are designed to push you to see certain things, to conceive of them in a certain way, I suddenly really wanted to understand, what are my algorithms driving me to do? And every idea that
That's why Jung said every person has to figure out the myth that they're living.
Whoa. Whoa.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
What story? Here's two ways of thinking about it. What story are you acting out? Or what character resides in you? That's another way of thinking about it. Or what spirit have you allowed to possess you? Or what spirit have you invited in and consorted with such that it can possess you? So when Cain is bitter, from Cain and Abel, Cain is bitter because his sacrifices go unrewarded. So he's bitter because his work is not successful. And everyone should be able to identify with that. There's no difference between work and sacrifice, by the way. They're the same thing. When we work, we sacrifice the present to the future.
Saw that clip from your book.
Yeah, okay. So now Cain's work is unsuccessful, so he gets bitter. And he's jealous as well of Abel, whose sacrifices are accepted and who's thriving. And so Cain's countenance falls. He becomes depressed and anxious and nihilistic and resentful, and starts to shake his fist at God. He does what Job's wife tells Job to do when Job is being tortured. Job's wife says, shake your fist at God and die. Well, Cain shakes his fist at God and kills. And so that's even worse. So Cain calls out God, just like bitter atheists do constantly. And they have their reasons, and says, what the hell's going on here? What kind of world did you make? Where I'm breaking myself in half with my labors and nothing is succeeding and everything is bitter and pointless. And God says, if you did well, you'd be accepted. And then he says something much, much worse, which you figured out already. He said, sin crouches at your door like a sexually aroused predatory animal, and you've invited it in to have its way with you.
That's dark.
Right. Well, it's terrible. It's terrible. And there's echoes of this in other mythological stories. So what it means is that Cain is suffering, and there's nothing sinful in that as such, right? Because the innocent can suffer. Cain suffers, and then he turns in the direction of temptation. He starts to nurse his resentment. That's another biological metaphor, to nurse your resentment. He starts to brood over his resentment, right? And so what that means is that spirit of arrogant resentment he invites it in, it takes up residence within him, but then he engages in a creative dialogue with that spirit. It's not merely possession, it's conspiracy. It's conspiracy between the eternal spirit of darkness, that's a good way of thinking about it, and a living human soul. That's what happens when you get resentful.